As the conflict in Ukraine enters its second month, casualties continue to mount as calls for a ceasefire grow. Last week, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan addressed NATO leaders at an emergency summit, pledging his country would continue to support the alliance and bolster its defenses. But he also called on fellow NATO allies to end their restrictions on Turkiye's defense sector. The long-running dispute over Turkiye acquiring Russia's S-400 missile system and its removal from the F-35 fighter program has been a major sticking point between Turkiye and the US. But could the conflict in Ukraine provide an opening to end that dispute? Let's take a look at this report. And joining me now from Stockholm is Ian Anthony. He is the director of the European Security Program at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. And in Ankara is Murat Yesiltas, director of foreign policy at SETA and a professor of international relations at the Social Sciences University of Ankara. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk and thanks for joining me. So, Ian, let me begin with you. How has Russia's attack on Ukraine exposed the need for countries from Europe to Asia to rethink their security challenges? I mean, how has the crisis changed how a country looks at its defense needs and the types of arms it needs to obtain?
Well, it's been a profound shock to the European security order, and it means that the politico-military dimensions of security are now very high priorities for pretty much every government in Europe. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be reflected in significant changes in the way that countries approach military security for the foreseeable future. I think that's clear.
What kind of changes you're expecting?
Well, for example, we have the NATO summit coming up in the summer where we'll probably see the confirmation of things that have already been proposed. NATO released from the promises it made to Russia about permanent stationing of significant combat forces in the so-called new allies, a release from the promise to Russia about where nuclear weapons would and wouldn't be stationed in Europe, an acceleration of NATO's plans for modernization of the armed forces and increases in military spending. I think all of this we can anticipate in the coming months.
So, Murat, we've heard reports that the U.S. informally suggested Turkiye send its Russian-made S-400 missile defense systems to Ukraine to help its air defense. What were the U.S. intentions behind this, knowing that this proposal would be shut down by Ankara immediately?
Actually, first of all, I think this is not the United States official position about S-400 transforming to another country to solve the problem between Turkey and the United States. So therefore, in order to make a comprehensive analysis about the ongoing crisis between United States and Turkey, we need to see the U.S. official position. However, I think this is not a realistic approach, to solve the problem. It will undermine Turkey's relations with Russia. Probably the United States sees an opportunity, to solve this crisis about the S-400s. But in terms of the political, aspect, and even in terms of the military aspect of this crisis, I think it's not possible that Turkey is going to accept United States so-called offer to Turkey to solve this S-400 crisis.
So, Ian, would you agree? I mean, if this was an irrational proposal, let's say, was the U.S. testing Turkey's resolve on the S-400s? I mean, were they trying to draw Turkey or drive a wedge between Turkey and Russia?
I think you can separate that into the two different parts. One is the question of what Ukraine actually needs at this moment in time, which is probably other things rather than the S-400 in order to be more successful on the battlefield. But then there's also the question of the long-term Ukrainian defense requirements. There's obviously not going to be any trust in Ukraine-Russia relations for a very long time. And so Ukraine is going to want to create a credible defense and deterrence force, accepting that it's going to be outside NATO. And here, those types of systems may play a role, but this is for the future, not for today.
But Ian, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if the U.S. is really trying to do its best to bolster Ukrainian defenses, why did it turn down the Polish proposal to send MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine free of charge?
Well, I think the concern there has been very well explained by colleagues in the US, that they don't want to do anything which can be interpreted as a direct NATO engagement in the conflict. That's why I think the question of the S-400 is one for the future, not for today. So I think it's really part of this effort to explain that NATO does not want a geographical escalation of the war.
So do you believe that the U.S. at the same time is trying to drive a wedge between Turkey and Russia?
It would be astonishing if they weren't trying to do that. But I think Turkey is coming to a point where the credibility of balancing along these three vectors of relations with Russia, Ukraine, and the West is really severely tested. And whether that's something Turkey can continue to do, I think, is an open question.
So, Murat, Turkish President Erdogan, speaking at last week's NATO leaders summit in Brussels, called on allies to lift these unjust restrictions on Turkey's defense industry. Is this likely to happen given the volatility of the situation in Ukraine? I mean, could Turkey's return to F-35 fighter jets program be possible?
I think there are two answers of this question. From the United States perspective, if Turkey, can fix the problem about S-400, yes, Turkey can, turn to F-35 program. But as you know, it is part of the foreign military sales program, and it depends on the decision which is going to be delivered by Congress and State Department. So therefore, I think now F-35 is a political problem between United States and Turkey, rather than being a problem about military and defense industry procurement. So from the perspective of Turkey, yes, there is still some hope from the Turkish perspective that Turkey is eager in terms of returning to the F-35 program. But Turkey doesn't want to see any condition to back to the program. If United States, will say that there should be a kind of fulfillment from the perspective of Turkey as a condition, so probably Turkey will not say no. So therefore, I think we should think about how this problem, first of all, solved in the context of political level.
Ian, what's your take on that? Is this a political problem? Because we know that another U.S. ally that acquired S-400 missile defense system is India. We know India is not part of NATO, but they're a U.S. ally. And so far, New Delhi hasn't suffered any types of sanctions like the ones Turkiye has. Specifically, I'm talking about the Katsa here. Is there a double standard here?
I think if we go back to what we said before about the strategic shock to Europe, we need to reconsider all of these questions. The F-35 is going to be the backbone of many NATO countries' air forces. It's clear now with the announcement by Chancellor Scholz of the large increase in German military spending that this clears the way for the F-35 sale to Germany. It's already an aircraft that's been bought by other European countries. Even a country like Finland, which is thinking seriously about joining NATO, has bought the F-35. So it would definitely be in the military interests for Turkey to acquire the aircraft because it's going to have to operate alongside NATO allies, which have that plane. Also, I think if you look at the future European security order, one of the things that's badly needed is a closer relationship between NATO and the European Union with their complementary approaches to security.
Yes.
And this also requires a serious conversation with Turkey about how to facilitate NATO-EU conversations. So I think we need to look again at all of these questions in the light of this strategic shock.
So, but if we could get back to my question, what do you make of India's case? Is India getting a Katsa waiver because it is politically more convenient in this case?
I think India is a textbook example to see how the United States is behaving from the perspective of political dynamics. When it comes to Turkey, I think there is a huge difference compared to the India. And probably I think India will solve its air defense missile system. Probably United States will do nothing about India when you take into consideration the changing dynamics of the global security architecture, especially following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think this strategic shock will also change United States perspective vis-a-vis India, and probably India is also trying to recalibrate its position not only vis-a-vis China but also vis-a-vis Russia. So probably India will continue its path in terms of its defense and military expenditure in the near future, I think.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.